Today's subject is bees, because the bees are coming out now, especially the bumblebees, who are among the first bees to come out. Okay, and so I always start a little bit about classification, or what's also called taxonomy, so how things are related. And of course, bees are in the phylum Arthropoda, which means jointed foot. And so just like crabs and spiders, they have these jointed feet, and they also have an exoskeleton that they will shed periodically. Okay, and then within that, they're in the class Insecta. So we've illustrated some other insects so far. We've done beetles, if you remember. Lady beetles were my very first session 1, way back on March 23rd, I think. And then we've done butterflies and moths. And in the future, later on, we'll do dragonflies too. So all of these guys are in the insect class. So getting a little bit closer to what a bumblebee is. And then, so in that class, it also includes ants and termites and mites and ticks. Anyway, so some things look like a bee, but they're not. This picture is a velvet ant, and this is also called a cow killer because it has such a bad sting. Now, I know a lot of bees. Oh, wait, no, I'll talk about that later. So as you know, I am an illustrator, and I love sketching and drawing and painting in the field. And I love drawing insects as well. So here's just a few examples of insects I've done. I really love aquatic insects, and we'll talk more about those guys in the future, like caddisflies and dragonflies and mayflies and damselflies. And then I really love illustrating beetles, and we've already done the lady beetle, as I mentioned before. So like longhorned beetles and rhinoceros beetles that I've been lucky to see in tropical places like Borneo. And then I used to collect insects too. And I just took this picture today because I looked at my insect collection from way back in college, and it looks like it's a little bit decomposing. So the other insects have gotten in there and are starting to decompose it. But this was my insect collection from way back in college. So I did a lot of studying insects in college, both freshwater insects and illustrating insects, and pollinating insects, which of course bees are. And so speaking of bees, so bees are within the order of insects. The class of insects, they're within the order Hymenoptera. And so this is one of my favorite bees, another one that I've illustrated. So some bees are really beautifully iridescent. And so what was I going to say about that? That includes a lot of bees that maybe we're afraid of, like hornets and yellow jackets. But we're going to talk about friendlier bees today. And so these are, though, a couple of scarier bees. I forgot to take the little thingy off there. Anyway, this bee here is called an ichneumon wasp, and also known as a stump stabber, because they have this really long ovipositor, and they will put their eggs, deposit their eggs through that long ovipositor into dead wood, where their larvae will eat the wood and develop and hatch out. And those are really big, like a couple inches. And then this guy over here, this is another kind of scary one too, called a tarantula hawk. And it's not a hawk, obviously, and it's not a tarantula either. It's a type of wasp. And this wasp gets to be a couple inches long as well. And I've seen these guys in the deserts of the American Southwest, and also down in Mexico and Honduras. And they're called a tarantula hawk because they actually attack and kill tarantulas and drag them back to their lairs and lay their eggs in them. Yes, Ayla, you said you're scared of that. So anyway, there are things, when you think of bees, there are scarier things like hornets and wasps and these kind of guys. But we're going to move on to the cuter, fluffier ones. So more related to our subject of What was I going to do? Oh, yeah, bumblebees. More related to bumblebees are carpenter and mason bees. Now, they're not in the same family, but they look very similar and they are closely related. And so, carpenter bees are these guys on the left, and they actually are called carpenter bees because they excavate their nests inside of wood and homes. And I had some in my porch once. In fact, I rescued a carpenter bee from a spider's web once. It was really funny. The poor thing had flown right into a spider's web that was on the porch because they were nesting in the porch wood, and they were flying back and forth, and they got caught in the spider's web. And so I rescued it from the spider's web, but the web was so strong. I got to show you here. Wait a minute. The web was so strong in that spider's web that I actually had to get some forceps. I got two pairs of forceps, one to hold the little bee's leg and one to hold the spider's web. So I separated them, because if I just would have pulled the spider out of the web would have torn its poor leg off. And so I had to keep hold of the web and the leg so I could separate them without pulling it off. And so I like to think of saying that I did surgery on a bumblebee. Anyway, so that's not quite a bumblebee, but they're closely related, carpenter bees. And you can see they're kind of fluffy, like a bumblebee. And then another bee that's closely related to bumblebees is the mason bee. And they're called a mason bee because they nest inside things as well. They're like a mason, which is a person that works with stones and with cement. And what they do is they take mud and they will make their homes out of the mud by pushing it into little cracks in like a brick wall or between tiles and things. And they will construct a home just like a mason would construct a brick wall. So those are close relatives, and you can see they're looking a lot more like a bumblebee than these guys, right? So they're not thin-waisted. You see how wasps generally are really shiny because they don't have any really obvious hair, and they have a really thin waist right here. And so getting more closely related to bumblebees, these guys are more robust and a little bit furrier. Yes, Charlotte says you like bees and not wasps, right? So getting closer then within the bumblebees related to honeybees and orchid bees, and they're all in one family called Apidae. And actually the most familiar one to you probably is the honeybee, and that's named Apis mellifera. And usually families are named after the genus that most represents that family. And so Apis is the genus, the family is Apidae. Anyway, here you can see this honeybee. Now they're not native to North America, they're native to Europe, and they were brought over here to be pollinators of crops. And there's only one species here. And like Charlotte had said, she really likes bees, and that Charlotte said bees help us, right? And so I really wanted to emphasize that bumblebees and honeybees and orchid bees are all really important pollinators of wildflowers, and honeybees are very important pollinators of crops. So we wouldn't have a lot of our food crops if it weren't for bees. And so that's why it's really important to try to protect them. Many bees are endangered or even going extinct because of habitat destruction and of non-native plants, but especially of pesticides. So it's really important, if you can, in your yard to not use pesticides. And and here, this is a great picture of the honeybee collecting the pollen. So all bees are really adapted to both eat pollen because it's so high in protein, and they also eat nectar. And then they'll carry that pollen back to the nest and feed it to their young. Yeah, and so this is just showing also that it's got the pollen kind of all over its face. And that's how it is a good pollinator, is it goes from flower to flower and gets the male pollen from one flower, deposits it on the female part of another flower. And that's how the flower sets fruit and makes seeds for the next generation. Yeah. And so anyway, so like I said, all of the bees are really important pollinators, this whole family. And though some of them are what's called nectar robbers. So what does that mean? So when a bee is pollinating, like we said before, he or she would have all this pollen on them, and they'd be touching the pollen part of the flower. But other bees kind of cheat. And so what they do is, if they aren't adapted or evolved to be able to visit a certain kind of flower, like this flower is a long tube, and this bee is too big to get inside of that tube right here to get the pollen and nectar. And so it cheats, and it has a very strong mouth, and it's able to chew a hole right here at the base where the nectar is. So it's stealing the nectar without moving any pollen. So it's not helping this flower at all. And next time you're in a garden and you see some bees flying around, try to look close at a flower and see if you can see any of these tiny little holes that are at the base. And that means there's been some bees that have been stealing some nectar without doing their job. Okay, great. Blake says your mom never uses pesticides. Good, very good. Okay. And so, like I said, you can attract bees and butterflies and other pollinating insects, including hummingbirds, to your garden by planting some things. And I know a lot of people right now are doing a lot more gardening than they normally would because they're at home more. And so maybe think about that. Think about what you could grow in your house, in your garden, or even in a pot on your deck if you don't have a yard, that you could attract bees and give them both their food and their nectar. So depending on where you live in the world, like here where I live on the west coast of the United States, you could grow California lilac, willow trees, bleeding hearts, various onions and catmint, various peas and poppies. They also really like clovers and columbines and all of these other things. So hopefully you can do that. Hopefully you can grow something. And for those of you who are new, last week we did a drawing of these poppies. So you might want to watch that session. And so moving on. There we go. So anyway, talking about another member of that bee family, the Apidae, that the honeybees and bumblebees belong to, there's another one called orchid bees. And you may remember we also sketched orchids a long time ago in this series, and you can watch that if you want in the replay. Again, if you're new, you can go down below where it says click here for resources, and you can go to that page that has all of the other 25 sessions, the names of them, and you're able to download the high resolution images that we do the drawings from. Yes, Nora says orchid bees are so pretty. Yes, many of them are this beautiful metallic colors, greens and blues, like that one I illustrated earlier. And one cool thing that a lot of bees have, and especially the orchid bees, is they have this hind leg that's really big. And see, there's a picture of it here. And that's the male leg is especially really big. And so that's a kind of a place, it's like a backpack where they can carry extra pollen back to their nests. Now, orchid bees do specialize in pollinating orchids, and there are a lot of those in the tropics. Not so much with the bumblebees, those are more temperate, but orchid bees are tropical. And so they go to these orchids, and many species of orchids and orchid bees have a one-on-one symbiotic association in that only one orchid species is pollinated by one orchid bee. And so they're really dependent on each other. If either one went extinct, there'd be real trouble. And one cool thing about male orchid bees is they not only collect pollen, they'll actually collect these other fragrances that the flowers make. It's not nectar, it's not pollen, it's a certain other thing. It's a fragrance that they collect, and the males will then give it to the females, kind of like a Valentine's Day gift. If your dad gave your mom a perfume bottle for Valentine's Day. So these bees will collect these scents, these certain perfumes from the flowers, and then kind of reorganize them chemically and mix them up, kind of making their own potion, and then give it to the females and attract them. Yeah, so isn't that totally cool? Okay. Yes, very, very shiny bee. Okay, so moving on, because if you're new, maybe you don't know, but we do a lot of anatomy here. Now, this isn't a science class, but we do some anatomy so that you will understand the structures you're drawing, and it makes it so much easier. And especially once we go to this step-by-step, well, we're going to draw this bumblebee, it'll be a lot easier. So bee anatomy is similar, but a little bit different from the other members of the insects that we've drawn before. So you might remember we drew ladybugs, and this is a really cool, different kind of beetle called a rhinoceros beetle. And they're a little different than bees, because remember, beetles have this hard covering, this hard outer wing that they have to move out of the way when they fly. And they have a little bit different structure, but just like other insects, they have three parts: their head and their thorax and their abdomen, and they have three sets of legs. So they're kind of similar. And then you might remember that we also drew the orb weaver spider a couple weeks ago. So who is here with the orb weaver spider? Say spider in the chat box. And if you're here for the ladybug, say ladybug. So spiders now are a little bit more distantly related to bees than beetles are, but they still have a very similar kind of body and this similar leg. And there's all of these parts, and these are the same parts that we'll see in the bee. And so there's a lot of names there. Oh, good. Katie did both. Selah did the spider. Cheryl did the ladybug. Simone, Elaine. Wonderful. You did both of them. Great. So this is all review for you then. So the spiders had some of the same anatomy, but spiders have 4 sets of legs instead of 3. And then their head and thorax is kind of evolved into one large structure instead of 2 separate ones. But we'll see very similar parts to the leg when we draw the leg of our spider. Okay, and then this is an illustration I found. I did this way back in 2007, and this is showing one of those orchid bees and how iridescent they can be. And it also is just showing the wings, which have some veins and cells in them. And it also shows the leg and how I talked about how they have this certain part of the leg that carries the pollen. And then moving on to the wings, thankfully, bees have a much easier wing to draw than things like dragonflies. So certain orders and families of insects have a lot more of these black lines, which are called veins, and then the little rooms inside each vein, which is called a cell. So thankfully, we're not drawing a dragonfly today, because that would take forever to draw all of those parts. And actually drawing those correctly is really important if you were an entomologist and you were trying to draw it to look exactly like that species. What I did once, I cheated sort of, but I don't consider it cheating, is let me see what I'm here. Once I had to draw a dragonfly for a project, and I had the dead one to study. And what I did is I put that dead one on my my Xerox scanner bed, and I copied it, and it copied the venation pattern like this perfectly. So then I could put that into my computer and trace it, and it was exactly perfect. So anyway, you can see that the bee, these are examples of different species of bee wings, and you can see how much simpler they are. Thankfully, they're really simple. So there's only a few veins and only a few cells. And we won't really see that in the direction of today. But if you were going to draw another one, you would definitely notice that they had those veins and they were a lot simpler. Okay, let's see. So where are we? Next, where are we here? There we go. Okay, so moving on then to the leg, the honeybee's leg, this is a close-up and it's really cool. You can see some of those same parts, the coxa, trochanter, femur, tibia, basitarsus, which is kind of a little bit different than the bumblebee, and then the tarsi, which are all these little pieces here. There's little segments, and then it ends up with a claw. And so you can see this is the bumblebee we're going to draw today, and I will have that up on the slide, the video while we're drawing so you can see. So anyway, the bee comes in 3 parts, just like other insects. They've got the green head, and then that head, of course, has the eyes and the antennae. And the antennae in the bees kind of are 2-parted. They're almost shaped kind of like this leg here, is that they go up and then they go down. So they have kind of this bend in them. And then they've got all these little parts in the antenna, different numbers depending on if they're a male or female. And then, of course, those are the mouth parts too, and we won't see those, and we won't really draw those in our bee today. They're kind of hidden. And then the thorax is the middle section. And just like in beetles, though, that's where the wings are attached. So there's 2 pairs of wings in most insects, except for the true flies, like a housefly only has 1 pair of wings. But most of the other insects have 2 working pairs of wings. And then, so you'll see those. And then also attached to this green thorax are the 3 pairs of legs. And so we'll see the pair of forelegs. Wait, am I pointing in the right direction? I can never tell. Here, the forelegs, the mid legs, and the hind legs. So there's 3 pairs of those. And then we do see those parts pretty clearly in the in our sketch. So I'm going to just show you those again. Those are the parts we're going to draw. And they're on all of 6 legs, but I've just labeled them here in this hind leg. We've got this first part that we can see, the trochanter, and then a big flat femur, a big flat tibia, and then these little tarsal segments, which are these little, you can draw little squares for those, or even just little lines to suggest that there's little tiny ones. And then it ends with a claw, just like over here, you can see there's a 2-parted claw. Okay, and then the very last part of the body is the abdomen, and nothing is attached there. The legs and the wings are attached to the middle part, the thorax. Nothing is attached to the abdomen, but that's where all of the, that's where most of the organs are. So the reproductive organs and the digestive organs, the excretion, all that. Okay, so let me see real quick. Kathy asks, is an Italian honeybee any different? I don't know. The honeybees that we have in America were brought over from Europe, but I'm not sure if that's the same species or if there are more species over there in Europe than there are here. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Okay. And then here's a close-up of the face where you can really see the cool compound eyes. And then bees also have some eyes in the middle that you can't see, especially in the bumblebee because they're so furry. But there's 3 simple eyes, they call them, that are kind of in a triangle above and between sort of their antennae. And this picture really shows you a good close-up of their mouth parts. If you wanted to add those later to your drawing, we can't see those very well in our photograph, but you can see them if you look at the replay and look back at this. Okay, and then this is a close-up of their antennae in case you want to make those. So like I said before, there's kind of two parts and there's like an angle. They're almost like L-shaped when they're at rest. There's this part that's next to the head called the scape, and then there's the part that has lots of little parts. And in the female, there's 10, and then the male, there's 11. Isn't that interesting? So that's one way to tell the male from the female bees. And then another really cool thing that you can't see very well in the photograph, but you could go back and add this later using this slide, is there are these little cleaner parts. So if you look at this part of the bee that looks like its knee right here, and you see this big spine, then there's this notch. And the cool thing that the bees do is, since their antennae get so dirty, it's kind of like if you were riding a bicycle without a helmet or glasses and you get all kinds of dust and pollen in your eyes, how would you clean that out? You'd wash your face, right? Well, bees get all sorts of dirt and pollen on their antennae. So what they do is they've got these little cleaners on their legs. It's super cool. They'll take their antennae and they'll strain it through this little thing right here. Can you see that, you guys? Say yes if you can see the antennae cleaners. So that's right here on this front leg. And so they'll kind of bend over and they'll put that antennae through that part of the leg and wipe it through. Does anybody see that? Say yes. Oh, good. Mary says yes. Cheryl, great. I'm glad you guys can see that. And so we have talked a little bit about bumblebees. Now, remember, they are in the family. They share the family with honeybees and orchid bees. And they're but a little bit different. They're even more robust. So you see how, cute and cuddly they look, like just a big bear, sort of. So they're really robust. They're very large, so they can get to be, an inch or more. And they're covered with this fur that also makes them look cuddlier. Now, it's not fur like a mammal fur or feathers like bird, but it serves the same purpose of keeping them warmer. And they actually are known to be able to fly at cooler temperatures than other bees. And so that's one reason they're often found at higher elevations, like in the high Sierra Nevada mountains and the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachians. And what else? Oh yeah, and so they can have color patterns because they have those long bristles. So they're almost always black and yellow, but certain species might have white on the abdomen or red or yellow or orange, and that helps to identify them. Now, there's about 250 species of bumblebees. All bumblebees are in the genus Bombus, and that's kind of fun to say, Bombus. So there's 250 or so species of Bombus in the world, and almost 50 in North America. And what else was I going to say about that? Oh, yeah. Kind of the scary thing for them is, in terms of their life cycle, getting hot here, I'm going to take this off. They, every one of them dies at the end of fall, except the queen. And she will overwinter in a burrow, like in an abandoned rodent's burrow in the ground. And then in the spring, she will come out and she will already have been fertilized by a male the previous year, and she will start a whole new colony. So they nest in the ground. That's a little bit different than most regular bees and wasps, some of which are in trees or in I know wasps that have been in my attic before and in my garage. I'm a little afraid of them. I was bitten really badly once by a whole swarm of wasps. But bumblebees, like we said before, are more docile. And even though they could sting you really badly if you were harassing them, they're usually really friendly and they're not going to do that. And so what was I going to say? Yeah. So because they're so fuzzy, and big, they can be in different kinds of habitats. Mostly bumblebees are in the northern hemisphere, and often well, there are some in the southern hemisphere, and there's just a few in the tropics. They're pretty much replaced by other families of bees that kind of look like them in the tropics. But bombus bumblebees are generally in more temperate climates and higher elevations because they are larger and they are fuzzier, so they can stay warmer at cooler temperatures and still be able to be out pollinating flowers and gathering pollen and nectar for their own food and for their hive. And this species here has a white rump. So remember how I said some of them on their abdomen are almost all of them are black and yellow, but depending on the species, they might have some white or orange or red, even kind of a red on them. And you can see how much pollen is on this one as well. So remember, they are important pollinators. And wait, so, okay, that's, yeah. Okay, now we're just about ready to go to our step-by-step. And so if you have, your tutorial high resolution image, you can use that. If you don't, you can have just a piece of paper and a pencil. But even if you don't have either of those things, you can just watch along with me, because sometimes it's good just to watch the first time through. So now we're ready to do our step-by-step demo. And again, if you're brand new here and you just came to me, especially if you're just watching on Facebook, don't leave, I promise. Just stick around here for a minute here, because it's going to be really educational for you. Let me see here. Oh, where am I? Oh, yeah. So we're going to get out of the slideshow now. And what we do next is we go to my pre-recorded video so that I don't have to try to talk and draw at the same time, because I used to try to do that and it was really hard. And so listening or talking to words while you're doing a right brain activity like drawing is kind of challenging. So if you're trying to draw along with me, that's fine, and you might want to practice doing that. But I would highly suggest you practice doing it again in the replay, and maybe just turn my sound off and just watch me draw, or even just practice again using those same techniques of proportions and alignment and negative shapes and those kind of things. Okay? Great. Okay, who's ready? Say me. Now you see in this whole video, I'm going to have this image on the left-hand side that shows all the parts of the bee, although we're drawing the other bee instead of this one, because this one did show the parts of the leg better. And you might want to draw that one afterwards. Okay, good. Dean and Katie and Elise and Mary, you're all ready? Okay, great. So then I'll just keep this image up here while we're drawing to help you. And you also might want to go back to the replay to some of those other close-ups of the leg and the antennae if you want to go a little bit more slowly and add some more details. I didn't add those many details because, again, I was kind of pretending that maybe I'm out in the field and I'm looking at a whole bunch of sunflowers, and there's a whole bunch of bees coming and going for maybe 20 minutes. And so I would just be maybe doing a compilation sketch, looking at all of those individuals of the same species, okay? So we can kind of pretend we're doing that. And remember, on Thursday, we're going to be drawing sunflowers. And so you might want to wait to actually draw the sunflower that this guy is sitting on later. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, yeah, let's get going. All right. So now, first, I'm always just kind of looking at my bee, and we've done this already, but if we hadn't, I would definitely be spending some time just observing the bees, nectaring on the flowers and collecting the pollen and just getting an idea of what they look like in general, their size and shape and species, and what we're really going to want to notice about that bee. And I can imagine that after you've gone through this workshop and learned a little bit about bee anatomy, you're going to be a lot better at drawing bees because you know that already. Okay, so we're going to pretend we kind of looked at this guy already because we have. And then I'm just going to kind of start drawing really, really feathery. So I'm almost just making ghost lines super light. So you're not really supposed to see these yet, but you can go ahead and start drawing very light. Pretend you're just tickling the paper with your pencil and that you're hardly pushing down at all. And so I'm just kind of going to make a little oval that represents the whole bee's body. And then later on, we're going to add the parts and the legs and the wings. But I always start with the basic body. So I'm just drawing this big oval that represents the whole body. And then I'm just placing it on the page. Okay. Now I'm going to start doing each of the three parts. We're going to start with that head. It's sort of triangular. And again, just I'm going to be light and loose. And later on, I'm going to come back. Oh, I thought I got rid of that. I'm going to go on and come back later to adding more details to the head. So this is the way I always work, is I always work a little bit everywhere, just in case my bee is going to fly away and I don't get another chance to look at him. So I just got sort of the triangular shape of the head, and then I'm going to get this oval of the thorax. That's that center part where the wings and the legs are attached, and I'm measuring its width and its depth. And I just put little tick marks on the paper. Oh, Anne, I'm so sorry. Yes, that'll happen. Last couple years ago, we had some robins that got killed, and there wasn't much left of those. And that was the robin that I drew in my weekly sketching prompt called Drawn to Death. So Anne is mentioning one of my weekly tips, and that's another thing that you can sign up for if you go to the blue button below here on Crowdcast called Click Here for Resources. I invite you to sign up for my free weekly nature sketching tips, which are 52 weeks so far, actually, because I started them almost a year ago, and I might draw more and video more. There's a couple videos every month too. All right, anyway, so we're doing the thorax, and we're just doing this really lightly, but I am drawing a little bit darker than I normally would, just so that you can see this, because these guys are fuzzy, so later on we're going to want to add those fuzzy edges, so we don't want that line too hard, but again, I'm drawing it darker so that you can really see it in the video. So just getting this oval of the body, thorax, that is, first, before we add the wings. And then the abdomen, not very much of it shows. So it's kind of foreshortened in a way, I guess we'd call that, where it's farther away from you. So it's smaller than it would be in real life. And there I am double checking the total length of the bee. So you see how I'm just working really lightly and loosely everywhere, and I'm continuing to double check my proportions. Because if you rush to draw something and you haven't really thought about your proportions, you might be unhappy with it at the end, and then it's kind of too late. So now I'm going to add the wings. Now you see how I did that little line right there? That was just sort of the idea of the flow lines. I was kind of seeing where that wing flew out of. You see that? Not flew, but where that wing line sort of flows out from the head. And again, just measuring from the edge of my paper there. and that oval shape of the wing. I think that wing is under the other one. And then I just drew a line showing where the other one starts. And at the base of each wing, there's a little bulbous part. I forgot what it's called, but it's kind of like a bigger joint that the wings attach to. Remember, there's actually 2 pairs of wings, but we only see sort of 1 pair on the top. And we're not going to give much detail to these wings because they're sort of in the shadows and we're seeing them sort of just on the side. But if you, look at the replay slides later, you can see some patterns of wings of the bees that you could use if you wanted to add more patterns. Okay, so now you see it's kind of the first time I am doing some erasing because I just got the 3 body parts and the wings. And I'm just modifying things, mainly just cleaning up those lines to just be a little bit cleaner so I don't make a mess. And I'm double checking some of my proportions, like the width of my thorax. And you see right there how I immediately saw that I had drawn the thorax too wide. And so that's why I really work a lot on drawing the central part of an organism first before I start adding really any of the appendages, so that I can really make sure that I'm building onto a solid, accurate structure. So I'm going to modify that right there, just get it a little skinnier there in the thorax. Okay. So then I'm going to add the legs next, because the legs are under the antennae. So I was just going to do the eyes and the antennae after I draw the legs. Usually I try to draw things that are on top first, so that I don't have to worry about drawing ghost lining things that are underneath. Oh, good. I was just checking to make sure that my live stream is still working. That's cool. Okay, so anyway, we're seeing that we see 3 pairs of legs. We don't see them as clearly as in this one, but later on you can go draw that second bee on your own and really show all of those parts. But the front legs, the 4 legs, are shown pretty good. But they're all a little bit hidden within the petals of the flower as well. So we're going to start with the his left foreleg. His or her. Actually, I don't know. And there I am just measuring how long that leg is going to be, and it's kind of wrapping around in front of the face. Right now, I'm just going to make a line for all 6 legs that sort of shows their angles and how long they are. And then I will draw each part of the leg as we see the parts labeled on the left-hand side. Now the bees' right legs. Or, well, I mean, yeah, now the 2 hind legs, I'm sorry. So we did the forelegs, then the mid legs, and then the hind legs. So anyway, I just got those lined up again, as if I'm pretending that I'm drawing a live bees that are in my backyard in a field of flowers, and I don't have all day maybe to draw all the parts. I just wanted to get the emphasis down first. And if I knew the anatomy, then it wouldn't matter if he flew away. I would know how to draw those parts of the leg if I wanted to be that detailed. But now we're going to pretend that he came back and he's really loving this flower and he's still sipping on the nectar and collecting the pollen. So then we're going to continue on with some more details. So now I'm actually going to draw each of those parts of each of the legs. So mainly what we see in each leg is this femur and tibia. And then a little bit on some of the legs, we'll see the base of the leg or the end of the leg. So I'm just kind of doing these little kind of ovals and rectangles that are kind of suggesting this shape of each part of the leg. But of course, if you were an entomologist, you would want to draw those pretty accurately because those are pretty important in classification of insects. Is the shape of their legs, the number of segments, and how big each segment is. Okay. All right, now the mid legs. And so that's pretty much, this one we're drawing now. So you can see most of those parts, it's almost at the same angle. And so see what I did there? So I had gotten that femur, it was too short. And I was noticing how long it was compared to the front leg. So now I am fixing that. So that's why sometimes I leave these mistakes in so you can see that I don't always do it perfectly the first time and that I'm not afraid to fix it. So you're always going to want to, value the truth that you see in front of you over being quick and dirty about it. So now I really am comparing. You see, I'm comparing the length of these parts to each other and sort of also that negative shape between them. So before I hadn't gotten that second and third part long enough. And then the rest of that leg is kind of hidden in the petals. So I didn't finish it, but you can later on if you want to depends on how your bee is going to be sitting on your flower. And that then the bee's right mid leg. And there I am again looking at the length of the leg compared to like a part of the face. So that's what I was noticing with my pencil there, is kind of lining it up horizontally. See right there? So I'm making a line. And so that's an example of me using the idea of alignments, or what structures are aligned with other structures. And here, I think I made this too long too. It's getting too close to the bottom of the paper. So that's why I'm going to fix that and make it shorter again. That femur was a little too long. So now I made the femur and the tibia shorter. And now I'm adding the tarsal segments and the claw. Now those hind legs, you don't see that the bee's hind left leg very well. It's kind of hidden. So I just mainly showed the femur. And his very last leg, we're drawing the trochanter there. And remember, these legs, these rear legs are really big and flattened like we saw in the orchid bee. And so those areas are also really fuzzy, so they can carry a lot of pollen back there. You'll also notice each leg has one of these little spines at the base of the tibia too. They call these tibial spurs. So you might want to add those in too. And also remembering that the bee has this little notch that you may or may not be able to add, but that's the little notch that they put their antennae in to clean their antennae. So there's all kinds of details you can add if you wanted to. Depends on how much you're drawing it. Elise says, let's do ladybugs. I did do ladybugs. That's the very first session. So if you go to the resources page and look at the very first session, you can get that replay. Okay, let's finish that last leg. We're running a little bit over. I try to keep the bulk of the lesson to an hour, but since I had a little bit of issue getting started on time with Facebook, I'm going to be easy on myself. Okay, and then that last part of the leg also is hidden beneath a petal, but you can add it if you want later, depending on what your flower is going to look like that your bee is sitting on. And remember, we're doing sunflowers on Thursday, so you can combine those two illustrations Thursday if you want. Okay, so now I was just cleaning up those legs a little bit, and then I'm kind of thinking about where to go now. So now I am going to do the rest of the head because those eyes and those antennae are on top of, they overlap on top of the forelegs. So I wanted to draw those afterwards. So I'm drawing those two ovals for those compound eyes. Like I told you before, they have 3 simple ocelli too, but you can't see those because they're too fuzzy. But those would be right kind of here between the eyes and the neck, sort of. But we don't see them here. It's too fuzzy. So then I'm going to add those antennae. And remember, the antennae kind of has one long segment that's not segmented. And then it goes in a little L, like it bends like a little L. And then there's a bunch of segments. And those segments differ depending on if you're a male or female, but we can't see that at this size. So I'm not really adding that kind of level of detail. But I'm putting that antennae on top of the leg, just like it shows in the picture. All right. How you guys doing? Okay, then I'm looking at the thorax. And bumblebees always kind of have this unbristled part in the middle. I know there's a name to it, but I forgot it. But it's kind of this shiny part in the middle that doesn't have any long bristles and looks black. So I just sort of indicated that a little bit right there. I'll make this all fuzzier in a bit. But first I want to attach the wings. Remember, both the wings and the 3 legs are attached to the thorax. So I'm doing this long oval with the wing. And then the fuzzy edge there. I'm not being really very realistic. But again, it's pretending we're just kind of in the field and we're going fast. If I was doing this as an entomological illustration for a scientist, I might spend 10 hours on getting this illustration exact, but I don't really like doing that anymore. I'd rather draw in the field, which you guys probably do too. Okay, so anyway, I just drew 2 wings. Like I said, there's 2 pairs of wings, but they're both folded back on each other because he's just kind of resting on this flower, he or she. And they're at an angle, so you're not really going to see all these veins and cells of the wing, especially not in this lighting condition. But if you wanted to add those more, you could look at one of the illustrations in the previous slides. Okay, so now I'm going to just, I went back to the head. I'm kind of skipping around a bit, but I'm going back to the shiny eyes and just going to make them reflecting some light here. Just adding some, color patterns and reflections, and then the fuzzy bristles to this guy, and then we'll be done. And then I was just adding the little lines to the antennae and the darkness. It's going to make the head look dark and pigmented. The hairs are a lot more sparse on the head and they're shorter and black. So that head's going to look different than the much fuzzier yellow thorax. Are the antenna below on the side of the eyes or mid-eye? Okay, so Lizbeth, if you look over here where I drew the antennae, so I think they're kind of mid-eye between the two eyes. They're coming out about there. So now I was just making the thorax a little fuzzy, and I'm emphasizing that base of that wing. And just getting that bald spot a little softer looking. So, you could spend a lot of time making this fuzz look a lot softer. That does take a while. It takes a really light touch because you don't want to make it too coarse looking. So mine looks a little coarse. And no, the antennae don't come out of the eye. They come out between the forehead, kind of next to the eye. So if between the eyes, I know they look very close, but if you look at another picture close up in the other slides, you could hopefully see, I think, that if you see where my pointer is right here, they're coming out between the two eyes about mid-level from the top to the bottom of the eye. And his abdomen has some color patterns. Remember, every species of bumblebee would have maybe a different pattern of black and yellow, and some might have some white or red or orange. So you're going to want to notice that. Okay, goodbye, Selah. All right, so now I'm just quickly adding a little bit of value. So, dark values and light values. So again, we can't really see the veins and the cells in the wing. So I'm just in general making them a little darker. I'm just kind of being a little messy here. And let's see, I was just going to darken the legs, and it doesn't matter what how you do this now, but I'm just adding the colors sort of and the fuzziness of the legs and the body. And some of the hairs on the legs are really long, especially on that rear femur, remember. So you might want to emphasize that later. Yeah, Nancy asks what that black spot is. I don't know what it's called, but almost all bumblebees have this little area that looks like they're going prematurely bald in the middle. So I don't know what that's called. I forgot to label that. Yeah, so anyway, I was just kind of looking around, just giving them some value. Again, you could do a lot better job than I did. I should have just done this all the way through and then speeded it up for you. But I'm just doing it in real time, again, as if I'm in the field. So I'm both adding some lines that represent both the color, like black or yellow, as well as the fuzziness. So just emphasizing that a little bit before we go. And if you have the real photo with you, you'll really be able to notice just how fuzzy some of those legs are, especially this leg back here. And remember, the bee's legs are specialized to carry pollen back to the nest. And so again, just adding a little value to suggest the black head and the black legs. Let me see if the Facebook thing is still going. Yep, good thing. Wow, that's very cool. I upgraded Crowdcast to be able to include this multi-streaming so that people can watch live. And hopefully my program tomorrow with Birds Caribbean will be live on their Facebook page too. Tomorrow, that's at 10 a.m. Pacific. Yeah, so continuing just to add a little bit more value, just being quick and messy as if I'm in the field. And you might want to just spend more time on this depending, or you might like to add colored pencils to emphasize the yellow bristles and the black bristles. And so, I might have done that earlier instead of continuing on with the graphite, but I just decided to finish with the graphite here. And then I'm just really basically emphasizing that central disc of the sunflower and then those ray flowers. We'll talk about all of that on Thursday when we do the sunflower family. Okay. Well, that's about it, I think. I was just going to play with it a little bit more. You could too, of course. This was just quick and dirty, as if we're sitting outside and it's a spring day and the bumblebees have just come out. And the female bumblebee is hungry. Diane, you said it was trickier than you thought. Yeah, there's kind of a lot of overlapping structures and all those parts of the leg. But again, you might want to practice. You might want to draw this other one here. Draw this other one, and then you'll actually have the exact labeled anatomy to copy from on the left. So that's your homework, is to do that one. And it'll get easier. Remember, just like any skill, whether it's throwing pottery or cooking, making homemade pasta or anything, gets better with practice. Mine definitely isn't that great today. But remember, I want you to remember the process over the product and progress in your art and observation skills over perfection. Okay, so even if you hate your drawing and you crumple up and throw it away in the garbage, I guarantee you're going to know more about bumblebees and remember more than you ever would have if you didn't do the drawing. Dean liked your tapir better. Yeah, I liked your tapir too. Yours looks more like an angry crab than a bee. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get the bees sweet looking. Oh, hi, Deborah. How are you? Oh, boy. Someday we'll go on a trip together, huh? She asks, are the vein patterns in the wings the same between individuals, or are they like fingerprints? No. So the veins are very particular to a certain species and family. And so, like I'd shown earlier with the picture of the dragonfly, they have lots and lots of veins. And in fact, there's numbers. They're named. Wait, let me see. Good. Yeah, no, the pattern of the veins on the wings has nothing to do with individual genetic variation, although it could be slightly different, but it's definitely not like a fingerprint. It's supposed to be a structural part that helps to support the wing. And, the wings are smaller and shorter than in a dragonfly. So a dragonfly kind of needs more of that scaffolding of all of those veins and the cells. And those actually all have names. I don't think I have a picture with me, but like in a textbook, if you were an entomologist, you would have to learn all of the names of the veins and the names of the cells that are created by the veins. So, yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to get going. It's time for lunch, and I've got lots of other things to do to prepare for tomorrow. Okay, yeah, it's a beautiful spring day today. It's over 70 degrees here in Oregon already. Okay, take care, you guys. Hope you had fun. Bye-bye.